There was no law governing, my lord, the rights and other rights and other, my lord, immunities to the LGBTQ community, my lord. Nalsar judgment came, thereafter Navtej Johar came. Lord, now kindly see, my lord, my affidavit. I am not on the merits of the matter, my lord. On merits, I have different arguments. Please see the Transgender Act. Most of the arguments, my lord, are covered. There is no legal lacuna. There is a statutory framework and there is a conscious omission by the statute. My lord, in my IA, my lord, I have annexed the small act. My lord, this is 2019 act after Navtej Johar. अरे एक मिनट
I'm not talking about transgenders here.
Lord,
My
your
case
lordship
is
have
not on transgenders. My case is not on
my
transgenders.
lord, my learned friend may allow me now. My lord, I never interrupted him.
But then, sir, I am on my legs. I want to finish my thing.
Lord, he is not. He has not seen the act. Otherwise, he would not have said this.
Wait. We have permitted your side to.
I know that.
Just open and give us a perspective. Article.
No, I am not saying no, Lord.
You shouldn't plead violation of
No,
article.
I am not complaining. I want to get on
You
with
must
it.
also get a right to set forth the contours, and we may be able to put some.
I appreciate. No, I am not.
How we are limiting what we propose to limit. So that
Lordship.
then, unless you know what he has to say, how can
Lordship,
Lord,
please.
this is, of course, my lord, subject to my first respectful submission about the maintainability. But, my lord, just I'm assisting your lordships on this. Lord, this comes after your lordship's judgment of 2017, Navtej Johar judgment. Lord, please see, my lord, so that my learned friend rest assured, page 34. Your lordships have that, my lord, my application.
The act actually.
Act, your lordships have the act, my lord. Kindly see section 2. I'll not read all sections, my lord, some of the sections. Appropriate governments, your lordship can skip. Establishment, defined. Family, defined. Inclusive education, defined. Institution, defined. Please come to 2K. Transgender person means a person whose gender does not match with the gender assigned to that person at birth and includes trans man or trans woman within bracket whether or not such person has undergone sex reassignment surgery or hormone therapy or laser therapy and such other therapy bracket over persons with intersex variations, gender queer and person having such socio-cultural identities as so and so, so and so, so and so. Correct, my lords? Your lordships concern freedom of choosing sexual orientation. No objection, my lord, cannot have any objection. That's my lord's judgment. Freedom of privacy, no objection, act take care. Discrimination, there cannot be, the act takes care. I'll, my lord, show to your lordships. The limited question is conferment of a socio-legal status and whether that can be done by judicial adjudication, and I'll come to special marriage act. Lord, now please see prohibition against discrimination. Lord, all arguments that we are not getting this, we are not getting treatment, we are not getting, Lord, please see this. No person or establishment shall discriminate against transgender person on any of the following grounds, namely the denial or discontinuation of unfair treatment in educational establishments and services thereof. And transgender here means LGBTQ plus, not, my lord, transgender as we colloquially or, my lord, conventionally understand. The unfair treatment in or in relation to employment or occupation, the denial of or termination from employment or occupation, the denial or discontinuation of unfair treatment in healthcare services, the denial or discontinuation of or unfair treatment with regard to access to or provisions of enjoyment or use of any goods, accommodation, service, facility, benefit, privilege, or appropriate or opportunity dedicated to the use of general public or customary available to the public, denial or discontinuation of unfair treatment with regard to right of movement, denial or so and so unfair treatment with regard to right to reside, purchase, rent, or otherwise occupy any property. These are all criminal offenses if there is a denial. Denial of access to removal from unfair treatment in government or private establishment in whose care or custody a transgender person is, then recognition of identity of transgender persons. recognition of a transgender person shall have a right to be recognized as such in accordance with the provisions of this act. Right to dignity, right to personhood, as my Lord, the Chief Justice said. A person recognized as transgender under subsection 1 shall have a right to self-perceived gender identity. Application for certificate of identity. My Lord, statutory certification is given that you are falling within the definition of transgender under 2K, based upon which you exercise your rights. And if there is any violation, there are penal provisions. Then issue of certificate, change in gender. My lord, even if my lord, in LGBTQ, there are changes which take place, my lord, because of hormonal therapy, other therapies, operation, etc. My lord, there is a concept of fluid gender. Sometimes a person is male, for a few days he is female, etc., etc. My lord, let's not go into it. That's on the marriage, and we have much to say on that. Change in gender. After the issue of certificate under subsection 1 of section 6, if a transgender person undergoes surgery to change gender, either as a male or female, such person may make an application, my lord, then he gets a new certificate. Obligation of the appropriate government. There are statutory obligations, either central government or the state government, as the case may be, to take steps to secure full and effective participation of transgender persons and their inclusion in the society. The appropriate government shall take such welfare measures as may be prescribed to protect the rights and interests of transgender persons and facilitate their access to welfare schemes framed by that government. Appropriate government shall formulate welfare schemes and programs which are transgender sensitive, non-stigmatizing and non-discriminatory. Appropriate government shall take steps for the rescue, protection and rehabilitation of transgender persons, etc., etc. Then, my lord, obligations of establishments and other persons. Lord, there is a provision for reservation for transgender persons. It's not, my lord, right now nobody is arguing the question of dignity, respect, privacy, etc. Right to choose one's sexual orientation. The definition is widely worded. Any deviation from the normal sexual my lord, orientation is protected under 2K. And, my lord, rights are given, and any discrimination is criminally prosecutable. Right now, the limited question is, can by a judicial adjudication process, this honorable court create a institution of marriage for the simple reason, Lord, whether we like it or not, whether they give it up or not, whether, my Lord, your court would go into it or not, it necessarily affects personal laws. Lord, Hindu Marriage Act is a codified personal law. Islam has their own personal law. Part of it is not codified. Hindu law also, part of it is
Getting
not.
into it, Solicitor, we said
Only a
earlier
minute.
to them that so far as personal laws are concerned, we are not at present getting into that arena at all.
That's not the point. Somebody who is Hindu, who is not here, can come and say that, why did you not give me the same treatment? I want to be Hindu. I want to marry under the Hindu Marriage Act. And if you give benefit,
We are not getting into it.
We are
Why?
not getting into it. So then where is
your lordship will have to. Right now, your lordships don't have that argument.
We of
There's no
course not.
compulsion. We
No,
must get.
Only, like, can
You
I?
don't have to decide the broader in order to decide the much more restricted
That's what he
arena.
said.
Another aspect, and which I that confining the remits, my lord, I have something to say, my lord. Lord, your lordships would have Hindus, Muslims, everyone, whether your lordships go into or not, everyone will be affected, and therefore the central government very respectfully but specifically, my lord, prays that states will have to be heard.
How many times will you
That's
say
the
the same
question
thing?
we are trying to pose, Solicitor. If we are not touching the person, it's like saying that you must touch personal law. We don't want to touch personal law. We don't want to touch personal law, then why state should be heard? We are confining our limit at the moment only to one issue. So for that issue, whatever has to be heard
No,
is
my
only
lord,
for that issue, which is
marriage.
under the special completed, then you may answer. Under the Special Marriage Act, can we read it in a manner that it is a person? That's all. We are saying we are not going into it. So why should there be a compulsion of the court? You must go into it.
Mr. Solicitor, can
That's
you
it.
give an example of what you're trying to argue? Because if the remit is being defined in this manner, how do you say that this has some other repercussion?
Yes.
If you are
Lord,
that's kind of
one Mr. A, he is Hindu. He wants to continue as a Hindu. He wants to get married under the Hindu Marriage Act. He wants to undergo the.
We're not going to address
We are
that at all.
saying we are not rejecting or accepting. We are saying we are not doing it at the
Lord,
moment.
we are then begging the question, my lord, to
Maybe
No.
to reach somewhere. We are, my lord, short circuiting the issue, my lord. That's kindly, my lord, allow me. Kindly let me. My lord, I am for the first time begging that I may be heard.
To create something which
heard
we're not doing, and then you say you can't.
I am obliged.
understand what is that you are saying. We are saying we have confined them. They may have opened a very wide chapter. We said no, we don't want to get into that wide area. We don't get. Today we are only deciding this A issue. We are not touching other issue. Nobody is being prejudiced because we are neither rejecting it nor accepting it. Then we can't be compelled to hear everything else.
No,
At this
nobody
stage.
is compelling, my lord. At least on our side, we are saying your lordship should not hear. We are not compelling.
But you are saying don't hear this alone. Hear everything or hear.
No, I am saying don't hear it, my lord. I am
You're
not.
saying don't hear it at
I
all.
am saying let the parliament hear it, my lord.
That's right. But therefore, we are trying to steer a middle course, which is that we don't want to
Lord,
first say
if-
that, well, we will decide
Lord,
everything.
when we are deciding fate of,
And then be confronted with this argument.
is opening, but
it has several windows have opened.
on the window you'll have to open the entire door. So don't do it.
I would, my lord, kindly on the lighter side and don't take it, take otherwise. Several windows have already opened. Now they are trying to open the door. And I am saying that you will have to ultimately open your entire house.
Mr.
As your
Solicitor,
example, the question is whether those
He is relying on those windows which have opened.
windows have got sufficient breeze inside or
Confident? I am fully confident. Only a minute more. Only a minute more.
You may continue. I am only saying they came with a broader canvas, much broader canvas. We are saying we are unwilling to go into the broader canvas. We are not willing to go into the broader cost. We are not willing to go into personal laws issue. We are not willing to go into ABCD. Therefore, they have agreed to, for the time being, confine it only to the aspect which we are willing to rule on. And it cannot be said we must rule on everything. We are only willing to rule on that aspect. If that is the only remit which we are willing to consider, then actually their arguments or your arguments, you may have arguments whether it can be done under this act or not, whether even what is being sought to be canvassed by them should be left to the legislature to consider whether they would like to get into it. But the remit or the contours of the argument will thus have to be restricted only to the extent we are willing to consider the issue. It can't go beyond.
I'll just
That's all
give
I'm
an example why I am saying this. I'm just giving an
and
example.
it is
Live
still
example.
open to you to argue in response that don't go into even this limited remit.
aspect,
That
correct.
is again
I'm obliged. I'm obliged.
We are more
Lord,
than
what
open
has
to
happened
hearing.
is,
There's no
what
debate
has
about
happened
it.
is this. In Navtej Johar, when the limited question was decriminalization of Lord, section 3, X mentioned in 377, the central government very carefully filed an affidavit that we leave it to the wisdom of the court. We are not, but there we did say in no uncertain terms and recorded by your lordships that this is not an issue where we were even remotely touching about other issues of marriage, etc., etc. But as my lords have said, the window of marriage did open there. Now, today your lordships may not go into the question of personal laws, but the window of that personal law will open. Lord, ultimately, your lordships are dealing
Mr.
with a.
Solicitor, we cannot ever bind future generations after we are
That's
gone.
exactly
And
my
the
submission
deeds
is.
are dusted and done.
Lord, that's my.
That's the task for the future generations.
Lord, that's for.
Whether
That's
it's
my.
the legislature or the court, I mean, we leave it open to
Lord, that's
future
my.
generations to run
I'm
the
saying.
country with the
No,
sense of
I'm not
maturity.
saying your lordship would bind. Your lordship would never bind. That's the majesty of the court. But your lordships not going it right now and giving some lord, considering giving some relief, would not mean that your lordships have never gone. That would, my lord, open another. That's all okay, my lord. That's okay. But
It's quiet, it's the ground.
ultimately, my lord, your lordship will have to consider, but this even special marriage act does not prohibit. And entry 5 concurrent list is agnostic. It's not on personal law. It's a law of marriage. It's not Hindu marriage, Parsi marriage, or Muslim marriage. It's a law of marriage. It's their right to legalize, not to legalize, provide for many things, etc., etc. And therefore, my lord, again, I am reiterating that my preliminary application, and there is a reason why I am repeatedly reiterating. My preliminary objection be taken up first, and your lordships may issue notice, my lord, to all the states. I am reiterating that request with a purpose, my lord, with an intent.
All right, we'll reflect on it at lunch and we'll take a call.